Hi, welcome to the Lighthouse Sessions. Today I'm excited. Leslie and I are going to talk about all kinds of wonderful things. Leslie, why don't you introduce yourself and feel free to talk about how you help people master the skills to speaking success, because I feel that's a great conversation starter.
Thank you, Jeff. It is so fun to be here, and I was looking forward to this conversation. So I'm the owner and founder of a company called Business Speaking Solutions, and my goal is to help people take the confidence they have in one-to-one settings to a larger stage. Now, that might just mean their team meeting every week of 6 people where they want those folks to leave engaged and excited, or it might literally mean a stage where they're speaking to a couple hundred, or maybe it's a Zoom room. What I find is, you know this too, public speaking is the number one fear most people have. Yet, when we inhibit ourselves, when we tell ourselves a story about we can't do something, we can derail that story, we can unravel that story, we can tell ourselves a different story. And that's what I want to help people do, because no one ever shows up at work and says, gee, I hope this meeting today is boring.
No, they don't.
No, they don't. They want to say, gee, I hope I get something out of it, or at least I'm not like looking at my watch going, is it over yet? It's a good use of my time. And that's what I want to help leaders do. Now, maybe that's a leader in business and industry, or maybe it's a small business owner, but those are the folks that they're reluctant, yet they know they need to improve the skill.
I love that. And for what it's worth, I used to do a lot of speaking, and I would informally poll the audience. It was roomfuls of accountants, so we're more introverted and things like that. But when I gave them an option of being the guest of honor at a funeral or somebody speaking at the funeral, 99% said, I'd rather be in the casket.
I know. It's so sad. It's like, no, you want to be in front of the group. And so I created a program that I call 5 Steps to Speaking Success. And I've implemented that program with several groups. I've taken that program and turned it into a book, which people can find on Amazon. It's my 3rd book, actually. And I'm also excited to say that I'm going to launch a community where people can come and practice. Now, I tell people Toastmasters is a wonderful organization, and I highly recommend it to people all the time. But you have to be specific and follow their rhythm and their protocol. Maybe I just want to practice my intro at a networking event, or maybe I've got a line for an opening line for a presentation, but I don't know if it's going to land. Or maybe I want to figure out, how can I make my team meeting more interesting and get my team more involved because of my speaking abilities. Those are the things that I feel like people want to practice in a safe space. So that's what I want to create. And that's what I'm going to launch June 1st, a membership community where people can come and do exactly that.
And I think, honestly, in my experience, a lot of people don't like public speaking because they had some traumatic experience in school or something. And I look at it not so much as speaking, but as communicating.
Yes, you're exactly right. And one of my early clients, that was his challenge. 5th grade, doing a book report. Some kid in the back of the class started giggling. It wasn't at him. He's not sure, but suddenly the room exploded with laughter. He felt stupid and embarrassed. I don't think the teacher was very helpful either. And if I remember the story correctly, anyway, it paralyzed him. And he was a very successful franchise owner. The franchisor kept saying, come to the conference and share your story. Other people want to learn from you. And he's like, no, I won't. So he finally said, all right, I'll get some help with this, and then I'll come speak at the conference.
I love it. And I think that's, I work with entrepreneurs, and I always say, and you and I are going to be friends here, because I tell them they should have a signature talk, so that when somebody calls and says, hey, the local chamber's looking for a speaker, can you talk about, the answer should always be hell yes.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
And please, for the love of God, don't show up cold and go, okay, hey, everybody, I'm a little nervous. I don't know what to say, so I'm going to blather on. Nobody wants to be bored.
No. And please don't start with, I'm nervous. I mean, that's kind of a given, but I've seen so many, or it's so great to be here. I love the weather in this place, or what. Start with something compelling. Hook me from the very beginning.
I love that. And honestly, that applies to a 30-second introduction as well as to, an 8-hour workshop. And, I personally gave up on 8-hour workshops because I can easily bore somebody to death in 8 hours. Whereas if I tighten it to 4 hours, man, I can give them the condensed version. So.
Well, the other thing about workshops, in my opinion, too, is I need to go away and practice a little bit what I've learned. And so I much rather do something. That's why I created my 5 programs to be 5 separate modules over, ideally, 5 weeks, so that people can learn, practice, come back, ask questions, learn, practice.
I love it. Well, Leslie, for our conversation, I'm just going to share a weird little thing I discovered.
Yes.
So what I do is I create a master class where I teach all of the theory, and I make that a prerequisite. They can watch the video at their own speed. I turn it into a little workbook so they can do the work. And then I have the workshop where all we do is, okay, what did you do about this? Where did you get stuck? What questions do you have? It becomes a very practical session.
Yeah.
And I realized it was more interesting for all of us.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because that's exactly what I did. I've got some pre-recorded videos and worksheets that I send out to people before, and then we come together, talk about the material. Where'd you get stuck? What questions do you have? What worked and what didn't? What did you implement? Because to me, I can get all this in my brain, but if I don't act on it, doesn't matter.
Yeah. So let's talk about your community, your opening. So that's going to launch in June.
Yes.
Now, I can't recall when this will be airing, but it'll be mid-June-ish. So
Okay.
It might be live by the time we get here. So how would somebody know that they want to be part of that community?
Well, if they want a place to practice their networking intro, if they're a little rusty, or they're new to networking, or they're not sure what to say, or what they're saying isn't necessarily working. People don't approach them after and say, hey, Jeff, what you said intrigues me. Tell me more about that. Or, hey, Jeff, I know somebody that could use your service. I want to make that connection for you. So those 2 things, I believe, happen at networking, or should be happening at networking. That's why we're there, to grow our business, make new connections. Or if people want to try out some material, let's say, so maybe they have a presentation. You mentioned the chamber. Maybe I'm a business owner and I do have a chamber presentation coming up, or maybe I belong to the chambers. Not all chambers have oh gosh, the word went right out of my head. It's a place where business owners come together, roundtables, business roundtables. And it's my turn to host. I'm not really sure what to say, and I want to say it with confidence, but I don't know where to practice that. So that's a place. Or I can come together and say, I've got this idea. I'm not sure it's going to, help me figure it out for a presentation. Does it make sense? Would it be interesting? Those kinds of questions. I feel like there's not a lot of places for people to go and have those conversations. So that's my goal, is to create that space, and a space that's confidential, and a space that's safe, and a space where I can feel comfortable, asking those tough questions, or just saying it without anybody being critical.
Yeah. I love that. And I think that's the key. It's funny because a lot of people, I don't need to learn how to speak. My parents taught me when I was a kid. There's a difference between speaking and communicating. And my goal in all that I do, including my podcast, is I want things to be educational. and they have to be entertaining. Otherwise, they don't transform. And if they don't transform, what was the point of it?
Exactly. Well, years ago, I worked for a company that did speaker placement. There's a word that I can't come up with right now. What do you call those guys?
Speaker placement agency?
Yeah, well, there's a technical term that for whatever reason is not coming into my head. Speakers Bureau. Thank you, Jeff.
Oh, there we go.
He ran a speakers bureau and he hired me on several occasions, but he always said people want to be edutained. They want to be entertained, but they also want to be education, but they want to be entertained. And it's true today. I mean, look at the popularity of the platform like TikTok or speaker reels. It's entertainment, it's quick, and I won't go into the disservice part that I think that's done to us, but anyway.
That's a totally other conversation.
Yeah, that word.
Now, you mentioned that you have 5 modules. Let's talk about what's in those modules, because again, I hear a lot of things my network could value and use, but I think let's let them know a little bit about what working with Leslie looks like.
Thank you. Yes. So 5 steps to speaking success. Steps is an acrostic, model, a framework. They each stand for something. So the first S is summon your inner champion, because we all have an inner critic that actively works. Well, it thinks it's being helpful. We want to retrain it to be an inner champion. Then the next thing we need to do is tackle obstacles early, because wherever we are, there could be obstacles that get in our way. Might be technology, might be how I format what I say, might be simply using the microphone. I noticed that in your preparation for this, a couple things: quiet space, good microphone. And then energizing and engaging your audience. No one wants to hear a boring speaker, and I don't think people intentionally are boring. They just don't know what to do to create that. So that's the E. And then the priming your presence. When I first created this, I called it your pre-presentation plan, because it's the 5 to 10 minutes before you step out on stage that really makes the difference. Because I've had a lot of people say to me, I'm fine until moments before, and it's the moments before that get me freaked out. So let's change that conversation. And then the last piece is sharing stories that stick, because data, while it's helpful, doesn't really make a difference. It's the story. So anytime you make a point, share a story, and remember that facts tell, but stories sell.
Yeah. It's funny. I watched a Tony Robbins documentary, and I think it was called "I'm Not Your Guru."
Guru on Netflix, yes.
And I love his pre-stage preparation. And I think, I see people who are trying to calm down, and they come out and they're very serene, and it's like, do you have a pulse? Let's get that energy up.
Yes. Yeah. Because again, and especially on camera, in Zoom rooms or whatever platform you're using, that's kind of the generic term, but we're on Google Meet. There's all kinds of virtual platforms, but that energy's got to be up there, and even in person. And I know not everyone is suited or cut out to be Tony Robbins. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, come be yourself, but be yourself in a way that engages others and gets people excited.
And for what it's worth, I tried to be Tony Robbins for a while. Turns out I don't have the wingspan to do that big clap. But I did a lot of technical stuff in rooms full of accountants. And you want to piss a room full of accountants off, ask them to high five each other. It literally did not fly. So adapt. And, what I learned, the best lesson in my life was just to be who I was, and, find the right audience to speak to. So,
yes. Yeah. Find that, because you're not for everybody, and that's okay.
Yeah. And
find what works for you. And so that's where I feel like this community will be helpful, is to be able to try things out in a space where if I flop, oh, well. I was talking to a friend at an event the other night, and he is a mortgage broker by day and a stand-up comedian by night. And I said, how do you practice that? And he said, it's hard. And you just have to go on stages and get feedback and know what works. And I'm like, wow, that's a tough row to hoe. Good for you.
Yeah. It is actually fascinating how many people I know who started in Toastmasters and then switched over to stand-up.
Oh,
And it was funny because everybody had a different reason, but all of them said, if you can handle a drunk heckler in a stand-up club, you're going to be fine in front of a professional audience. And I went,
yeah, that's probably true.
Because, again, I'm not diminishing Toastmasters, but when somebody said you can be the counter, I was like, screw off. I like my ums. They're part of me. And again, I get that there's ways to improve and things like that, but it was like, what I found, and this is, again, I'm a bit of a visionary, so I resist rules, but I was like, you're telling me how to be, you're telling me how to think, how to act. I don't like it. Because I got in my head, and then I'm on stage going, okay, first of all, number one thing they told me was I shouldn't talk with my hands. And I'm like, you're going to have to cut them off because they're always moving.
Exactly. Well, I heard, I don't know if this is true. I've never verified it. So maybe I'm telling something that's not accurate, but you're maybe familiar with this self-made man, Jim Rohn. Jim has,
Yep.
You can find, but I understand that he scripted like when he was going to put his chalk down back in the day when you had to write on a chalkboard, all of it. I'm like, wow, that is a level of detail that I would never, that wouldn't just work for me because I'm not that wired that way.
Yeah.
But I applaud him. And so if you can, like, yeah, Toastmasters is very scripted and very specific and works well for a number of things. Always recommend it. But yeah, to your point, you've got to fit within that mold, and not everybody does.
Yeah. And that's what I realized was, I was so busy and I'm on the autism spectrum. So I was so busy trying to figure out how to be, I forgot about the audience and how to speak. And what I realized works for me is I just stand up and I know the topic I'm talking about, but I also tailor it for the room. And, one of my I'd love your feedback on this. One of my great gifts was accidentally, I showed up at an event. It was going to be an 8-hour presentation. It was a workshop. And I lost my USB key with my slide deck on it. And I was up till 2 a.m. trying to recreate it. And I thought, you know what? This is an opportunity. So I went to bed. I got a few hours sleep. And I went in the morning and I came clean. And I said, hey, everybody, I don't know what I did with it. There's a USB key somewhere. Somebody's going to get a free USB key and be excited. I can, take a few minutes and recreate my slides and we can come back, or we can just have a conversation. And I happen to have one of those little flip charts in the room. And I said, okay, here's the topics I was going to talk about. Show of hands, who wants to hear this? Who wants to hear that? It was the absolute best workshop I ever did because everybody was, we co-developed it on the fly.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So do that all the time. If you're able to do that, because I much rather facilitate, which is, I believe what you said, facilitate the conversation as opposed to, and the other thing to think about if you're going to do a slide deck of some kind is people are reading that slide deck. So please, 6x6, no more than 6 points per slide, no more than 6 words per point. Make sure they're spelled correctly. I did that, boo-boo. So I'm getting ready to speak in front of about 50, 60 people 3 weeks ago. And the woman who's going to introduce me, it was in a theater at a community college. And it's up on the deck. He's in the control room. The slide's up. She said, do you know you have a misspelled word on your first slide? I'm like, no, I don't. I didn't. Let's fix that quickly before the whole auditorium fills up. So yeah, have somebody check your work.
Yeah. And for what it's worth, also, Okay, this is something I never have thought of, but I found it by accident. Again, in a room full of accountants, there's a certain element of perfectionism, but they can also be very childish. I had a slide. My 4 points were find, attract, retain, and train. And they all started giggling when the slide went up. And I'm like, what's so funny? And one person raised his hand and he said, your slide, the acronym is FART. And I was like, oh my God.
Oh, yeah.
So I've learned to laugh at things, but I was like, what are you, a bunch of children? And the answer is yes. Yes,
Yeah.
they are. But, you know, at the end of the day, I said, okay, everybody, what was the most memorable part? And they all said, we loved the FART acronym.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay.
Well, laughter makes things memorable. And I fully believe that Reader's Digest has it right when they say laughter is the best medicine, because you feel better. I mean, I want to leave my audience feeling better, and I'm sure you do too. And that's the whole goal. So if it happens serendipitously, great. If it happens on purpose, great.
Yeah. Now, for the record, I've left that slide in a lot of my presentations just because, but it's not as funny once you know it's there, and you know it's like, okay, I'm waiting for them. So let's talk about different advice, because one of the things that I always struggle with is, and I suspect you've thought of this, and that's why I'm going to ask this question. When there's a blueprint, I have to figure out how to adapt said blueprint to my situation. How much effort do you put in, or how do you help people take, you know, for example, the advice you're going to give for a workshop, I'm guessing, is different than a 15-minute roundtable at a chamber event.
Sure. To somewhat, but there's still a kind of a particular framework. And I say, begin with the end in mind. What do you want people to leave with or do or have because they've heard you? So is there an action? Is there something that they want to remember, to do? What is that ultimate goal? And then how can I backwards plan from there? So then how can I create the opening? I believe you start opening, closing, and fill in the middle. So what's my end goal? What am I going to start with at first? And then, because Jeff, people will remember how you started and how you wrapped up. And in the middle, yeah, maybe yes, maybe no, like the fart slide example you gave.
Yeah.
But other than that, because our attention spans are growing shorter.
Yeah.
And we have so much, I mean, chances are, and I ask people to put their phones away, but chances are somebody's got their phone out and they're trying to multitask, which only 1% of the population can do. So that's that's my answer to that.
I love that. And yeah, it fascinates me. I used to get people, they'd be asking me a question while checking their phone. And it's like, you could do one or the other. I'm not going to stand here and have the whole room wait for you.
Yes.
And that's, you know, as an audience member, I would beg everybody, mute your phones. You know, you may think the person up in front of you doesn't know what you're doing. Trust me, they do.
Yeah, exactly. You know, unless you have some emergency that may occur that you really got to, you know, attend to, put your phone away. Be present.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's, you know, I believe that the speaker has an obligation to be interesting, and I believe the audience has an obligation to be interested.
Yes.
And that's, you know, for what it's worth, I'm very empathetic. I can feel the energy in a room. And if the room is bored, guess what? You know, I'm going to either have to work hard to unbore them, which I don't mind because I can adapt. But, you know, I try to figure out who I'm following because I need to know what energy level I need to bring into the room. But sometimes I can't control that.
That's true. Nor can you control when somebody goes over. And so you always have to be, if you're in a lineup, you always have to remember, maybe I've got to shorten this up, or maybe I have to protract a little bit, but usually it's, I'm, you know, we're running late. You've got to cut off 10 minutes.
Yeah. I I'm going to share one of my weird tricks, because I used to do full days, and I'd bring in somebody who, each speaker had an hour and then there was a break. Like, it was very carefully choreographed.
Yeah.
And there was always somebody who took the timer as a suggestion. So between you and me, I would accidentally walk by the speakers with my microphone and, oh, sorry about the feedback. We're going to have to move on. I'm not subtle. Well, let's talk about, so I'm guessing you have your group program, you have your community. I'm going to guess you also have some one-to-one or some other ways people can work with you. So let's talk about how somebody can actually work with you for more, let's say, for more advanced cases of, I don't know, anxiety or
Yeah. So I've worked with people for 90 days. Oftentimes, in some cases, we've continued beyond that, but you probably know, people say it takes 21 days to change a habit. 21 days is a good start, but research will say it's really more like 80 or 90. So in order to cement things and make substantial change, so I have an individual program. I've also helped individuals in a one-time session develop their 60-second intro, because a lot of people that don't know what to say or what to do, especially if they're new to business ownership or new to a job or new to networking. So I've helped people in that way. I have 3 books available on Amazon if anybody's a reader and they want to read my stuff. So I can work with people in a number of ways.
Well, I'm laughing because when people come to me and say, how do I work with you? My first answer is always buy my book. And you know what? I don't even need to sell the book. I will send you a PDF, because if you don't like the book, guess what? The real person is no better.
Brilliant. And that's, yes, that's really true. Because if you don't like what I have to say, why spend the money? Yeah. And I only want to work with people that really want to do the work, but that we can have good conversations with. And you do business with people you know, like, and trust.
Yeah.
So if I don't like you, I'm probably not going to give you my money. So let's just get that out of the way first.
Yeah. And, a book, most books are $20 or less, pretty low risk and pretty easy way to get to know people. But it is fascinating because people will come to me all the time and say, I don't know who you are. I don't know what you cost. I don't know what you do, but somebody said I need to talk to you. How do we work together? And I always send them back to the book. And they're like, well, are you doing this to sell books? And I'm like, no, I'm doing this to save you wasting your time. Because if you read the first 5 pages and go, wow, this guy's a jerk, we don't need to talk. Now, if you read the whole thing and you go, oh my God, I love this guy. Well, guess what? Maybe we do need to talk.
Exactly.
So I'm going to ask some strange questions, and I look at this from the point of view of, I want people to understand what's slowing them down or getting in their way before they come to you. Mm-hmm. So what are some of the most common, I'm going to use the word objection. It's not the right word, but when people come to you and they're like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready to work with you or not, where are they tripping themselves?
For a lot of folks, it's time. Do I really have I would say, do you really have the time, not only for our conversations, because usually we're meeting once a week for an hour, but then to take what we've talked about and practice it. So one of my very best clients was put us on her schedule, but then put time on her schedule to implement what we discussed and what she left the meeting with. And she drove the conversation. It was where she wanted to be, not what I had prescribed. But I think that's important, is looking at your schedule and looking to see, can I actually implement what I'm learning right away? I have a friend who's a coach and a colleague and somebody I follow on social media, but one of his rules, if you will, is I'm not going to invest in anything that I can't put into play within 4 weeks.
Oh,
I'm like,
nice.
that makes sense because yeah, I bought stuff that sat on, yeah, I have.
They call that shelf help, and yes,
Yeah, exactly. And
well,
it really doesn't do any good. And so then are you willing? So I ask, are you decisive? Are you coachable? And are you willing to step out of your comfort zone? Because if you're not decisive, if you're not coachable and you're not willing to step out of your comfort zone, we probably shouldn't work together.
I love that. Now, back to your comment about time. How
Mhm.
much time? I'm going to guess, first of all, if I'm having a big speech tomorrow and I'm stage fright and I haven't done any prep, probably not enough time. But how much time is somebody looking at just to hone their speaking?
Depends on what they want to accomplish, but I have a lot of people come to me that they've got a presentation 30, 60 days out. And they really want to hone that presentation, not only the presentation, but their ability to stay calm, stay present, and deliver with impact. So I would say, because we're going to typically, we meet once a week and you do some things, we come back together, see how that works. That's why it's a 5-step process, because it's going to be 5 weeks at least. We can protract it every other, so it's 10 weeks, but that gives you the ability to build, because I think it's building. I think it's learning, practicing, come back, learning, practicing, come back. What's the shampoo bottle say? Lather, rinse, repeat.
Yeah. And honestly, I think most things should be that simple. And I think that's the piece people miss, and I've seen this where people go, they attend a conference, they attend a seminar, and they're all excited, and then they get back to work Monday and everything goes out the window because, oh, my phone's ringing, this is happening. I don't think people, a friend of mine, he's a therapist, and he said, don't bother going to therapy if you're not willing to integrate what you learned.
Yes, that's good advice.
And I was like, that applies to coaching and consulting and
well, training. Have you, Jeff, in my corporate life, I can't say ever once, I've gone to a number of workshops, seminars, conferences. Never did a boss say to me, hey, what'd you learn? What you going to implement?
yeah.
And so if you're a boss out there listening, start asking.
Yeah. For what it's worth, Leslie, I got in trouble once because I worked at a large organization and they brought all of their people into one place for this training. And because we were all traveling from across North America, I said, why don't we, as a group, meet Thursday night? It was a full week training. I said, let's meet Thursday night so we can discuss how we're going to implement. And the facilitator was offended that I would presume that he wasn't going to give us that. And it was funny because then he showed up to the event and started telling us what we were going to do and how we were going to do it. And it was like, okay, no offense, but you are the facilitator. We're the ones who have to show up at work on Monday and implement.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating to me that he was actually offended. And he told my boss, I found this out afterwards, he told my boss that Jeff guy's trouble. I don't like his attitude. I don't know that I want him there. And I was like, wow, the guy who wants to help you succeed, and you went to my boss and criticized me. And yes, my boss and I had a very lengthy conversation, and we concluded I didn't like this consultant because he was so touchy about his way or the highway.
That's so interesting because, again, so everybody comes at learning from a different style.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to hear what you say differently. And the application, I mean, your boss is different from my boss, even if we work in the same company.
Yeah. And that's the thing. We were all reporting to different bosses. So it was funny. And I'm going to ask you about learning styles, because this is one of the things that I obsess over. When I write stuff, when I create stuff, my default style is I am a learner who reads and writes. that's my default style. And I realized, this is late in life. I kind of figured things out. There's at least 4 different learning styles. And off the top of my head, one is visual, one's auditory, one is reading, writing, and the other one is kinesthetic. There's some debate that there's a 5th where people learn in community. What would you say to people who aren't willing to explore the audience language that they have?
I try to the best of my ability to add each one of those pieces in, because we do have different learning styles, and asking people. So I always ask my audience for feedback about what was most impactful, and what would you do different, those kinds of things. So as a presenter, being open to that feedback. It sounds like you just told that story about that consultant wasn't open to that. I think that's sad, because again, every audience is going to be a little different. Every group is going to be a little different. And you might have people that really want to interact and do the role play thing. But usually people come and they're kind of like, well, I'm just going to sit back today and see what I can learn. And I'm going to maybe make a few notes. And okay, but this is a workshop. That means work.
Yeah. I love that. Now, you and I could have a detailed conversation just on designing workshops and things. How can somebody, somebody's watching this and they go, I really like Leslie, let's connect. How can somebody connect with you, and how can they learn more? Let's say they've gone to Amazon, they bought one of your books at least. What's the next step in working with Leslie?
Yeah. Well, they can find me on social media. Specifically, LinkedIn is a great place to connect. They could visit my website and book a call. So there's no cost to an initial conversation to see if it makes sense. If you did buy my book and you like what I have to say and you think, yeah, I could use more, then let's talk.
I love that. Now, I could have asked you 1,000 things, and I always like to have the final word for my guest. Is there anything you'd like to share that we haven't talked about yet that maybe you think my audience would be mad at me for not sharing?
Well, I don't know if they would be mad at you, but one thing I like to leave people with, or a piece of advice, because sometimes people say, well, what's your piece of advice you have for when you're thinking about presenting? And it doesn't matter if you're seated, which both of us, I'm assuming you're seated, I'm seated, yes, or in front of a group, keep your feet flat on the floor. And when you move with purpose.
I love that.
That's what I would say to anybody that's preparing, and because I also, if you pace back and forth, you appear nervous. So move, but move with purpose, and learn how to step in and when to step back, and some of those kind of techniques or tactics, because they make a difference. When to lower your voice and slow down your speech, and when to get really excited and animated and make the point. All those things come with practice and come with time. But the most important thing you can do, I think, is your posture. So feet flat on the floor and spine straight up and down, and the posture your mother encouraged you to have always.
I love that. And, for what it's worth, I have a friend who has a stand-up desk, and he's got a bad back, which I get why he stands up.
Yes.
But when his back gets tired, he leans on his desk, and then he talks with his hands, and his camera shakes, and it's like, dude, I'm getting sick. So that was my little tip to people is, stable camera, because I didn't know this, but with the advent of all these video conferencing, there's a type of motion sickness where people are finding out that they're impacted by the change of the camera.
Yeah, that's true. Interesting. There's also something called Zoom fatigue people learn, but I didn't know about the camera thing. That's interesting.
Yeah. And, there are actually full-time Zoom consultants who will tell you, here's how to set up your camera. I can't be bothered, too many rules, but I do the best I can. And then at some point you just hope for the best, right?
Exactly. Well, and I like your background, I'm thinking is a real background. I have an objection to the virtual because most people look like holograms because they don't have proper lighting.
Yeah. And that's, you know, plain and simple. I have a green screen behind my background, but with the headset, I get weird. It looks really.
Yeah, exactly.
So I opted for, and, you know, again, for people who are looking for something simple, this helps me eliminate distractions behind me.
Yes.
I think I paid $100 for it. It's just one of those 3-fold room dividers.
Mm-hmm.
So love it. Well, Leslie, I want to thank you for hanging out with me and being on the show. If anybody's watching and you made it this far, I'm guessing you're curious and want to know more. So definitely reach out to Leslie. I promise she is an approachable human and very, very friendly. So thank you, Leslie.
Well, thank you, Jeff. It's been a pleasure.